Hello and welcome to your muscles lecture. This is going to go over all the different types of muscles. You can see behind me I have the muscle man, muscle woman, I have the head and neck muscle, I have the arms and leg muscles next to me. I have the pictures of them on the background of this slide. I have the old lab textbook, I have the new lab textbook pages in here. But the important thing is if you use this lecture correctly, you don't have to look up any other information. You have everything you really need to do very well on this material. So let's get started, because this is going to be the majority of your final exam is going to come from muscles, origins, insertions, actions, and innervations. Let's get started. So when you're sitting here looking at this slide, we don't necessarily have this model anywhere in the lab. This is the closest thing we have to it, and this really isn't, the muscle, that you'd want to use for this. But endomysium, paramysium, epimysium, fascia, and tendons, they are important, because it's kind of good to know how are the individual muscle fibers bundled. Because in your lecture class, you're going to have to figure out how do those muscles fibers contract. So understanding how they're all kind of wrapped together, how they're all working together with one nervous input or many nervous inputs, how many motor neurons are going to be working on one muscle, is it easy for recruitment, and all these other terms that you have to kind of become familiar with when you're working with muscle contraction. So what I want to show you is this picture. And this shows you the femur. This is probably one of the vastus or rectus femoris muscle. Kind of difficult to look and see if this is the back or the front. So we'll kind of just say this is a leg muscle. And what you can kind of see, you can see a muscle fiber right there. And the one thing that you can kind of see here is you can see there are little cylinders, little bundles. If you look really closely, they're all small little bundles of muscle fibers. And those are going to be surrounded by paramysium. So the paramysium is going to surround all these little one. And if you look, what's an endomysium? Endomysium is going to be inside that. Paramysium is surrounding the bundle. And then the epimysium is going to be this stuff up here. So if you're kind of confused, you have endo surrounding the individual muscle fibers, paramysium surrounding a bunch of bundles, and then when all of those bundles are now put together, you have epimysium surrounding them. So it's almost like if you looked at this one, you have one circle, that would be peri. You have a bunch of muscles, it would then be you have an endometrium surrounding the muscle fiber, and then surrounding all of these, you would have a paramysium. You have a bunch of bundles of these, that would then be surrounded by the epimysium. And then it's all wrapped up in one membrane called a fascia, and then the muscle gets attached to the bone via a tendon. And this becomes very important in the basis of everything we're going to talk about next. Because what you need to memorize, origin, belly, and insertion. So every single muscle has a start and an end. And it's important for you to know what is the origin and what is the insertion. Because if you're doing kinesthesiology, you're doing any type of movement, if you're a coach, if you are a weight trainer, if you are an athlete in any way and you're trying to get the most out of one movement, you want to understand what muscle you need to train and what is that full movement with the origin and insertion for that muscle. And the belly is just going to be the thick middle part of that muscle. So you have other things you need to know, like action, prime mover, synergist, antagonist, and fixator. These are mostly going to be in your lecture class. We don't really have much of these questions in our lab class, except for action, but we'll get to that in a second. But understanding, if you do a muscle movement, how is one muscle movement going to be opposed? What's going to be the antagonist? What's the muscle that's going to help that muscle make that individual action or movement? So knowing these terms will help you understand both lecture and lab, even though in lab class I will not be asking individual questions on any of those topics. So this is just an example from your lecture class that kind of tells you if you are doing a bicep curl. Most people think it's the biceps brachii, but it's not. It's actually the brachialis is doing the most movement. The one that's helping it is the biceps brachii, and then the one that's opposing it or antagonist is going to be the triceps. And then all the ones in the shoulder are going to fixate the shoulder, and the ones in the elbow are fixating the elbow. So those are the ones that are going to help make sure that the muscle movement can occur without any other extra movement in the other joints. This is what you need to memorize. And if you kind of see, this is kind of what this looks like, where you have the neuron coming in, you have the synaptic knob right here, and then you have the synaptic vesicles going across the synaptic cleft, and then you're going to have to get that signal to all these individual muscle fibers. How do you get the signal to the individual muscle fibers? Well, you have to use these different types of tubes. So you have a T-tubule running down the middle, and on each side of the T-tubule you have a terminal cisternae. If you think there's two terminal cisternae, one T-tubule, so 1, 2, 3, that equals a triad. And in between those T-tubules and those terminal cisternaes, that's the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So if you look at this model very, very, very close, you can see there is T-tubules running down the middle. There's going to be terminal cisternae on both sides of the T-tubule. Those three structures are the triad, and then the ones that network in the middle is going to be called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. You might think that's kind of strange, but this is how the ions are going to get down to the individual muscle fibers. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is going to be holding the calcium, and the calcium is what's going to be very important with the activating of your thick and thin filaments. And then this one. So this kind of gives you this view. And if you look way up here, and this part, you can see there's light and dark bands, much like you see light and dark bands here. So on this model, I can go over most of these questions too. The M line is, the M line is going to be in the middle of the dark segment, and the Z line is going to be in the middle of the light segment. From Z line to Z line, that is one sarcomere. So let's kind of take a look from your lecture class. What are all these things? So you have thick and thin, which makes it dark. You have just these, which makes it light. So if you're looking at these, the Z disc is going to be in the light. The M is going to be in the middle of the dark. The A band is going to be the entire dark band. The I band is going to be the light band. And you might think they're named for the type of light, like ionoscopic is going to be light. So you don't really need to get into a lot of detail, but you can see that these thick filaments are going to be in the dark zone, and the thin filaments are going to be in the light zone. And they're thin because they don't reflect light as much. So this model is kind of similar to what we saw before, and then just looking over these different types of things you need to know. With the T-tubule, the terminal cisternae, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, those are definite, and then just kind of understanding those letters and what they correlate to these individual models. And if you kind of look right down here, I have this model completely labeled for you. So you might say, that's a lot of things I need to memorize. Nope. All you're doing, T-tubule, terminal cisternae, triad, and then what are the different bands? Because I guarantee you, no matter what lecture teacher you have, they're going to make you memorize those bands, because those bands are going to be the foundation for muscle contraction. And that is going to be the most difficult thing you do for the second part of your AMP2 or AMP1 lecture. So knowing it backwards and forwards now, very important. So T-tubule, terminal cisternae, sarcoplasmic reticulum, you see the dark and the light bands. What's the middle line called? What's this zigzaggy line out here? What's the A band? Go back and try to make a key out of this so you can go and make sure that you understand all the things you need to know on this. And we are going to talk about the neuron and the synaptic knob later on when we talk about neurons. That's why I'm not covering covering it in this particular model. This one. These next slides are just going to be movement. So the best way to do this is to stand up, move. Do all of these exercises. If you have a mirror, sit in front of a mirror and go flexion. Flexion is going to be decreasing an angle. So if I decrease an angle, that's going to be flexion. If I increase an angle, it's going to be extension. And you might think this is kind of strange, but if you get good at knowing what all of these muscles are, when you have to take the final exam and you're trying to struggle, oh, what's the action for this muscle? Well, if you know where it's coming from, the origin, where it's going to, the insertion, let's just say you don't really know, what the parts are, but if you say it looks like it comes from here, looks like it's comes from here, and if it contracts, it's just going to bring this up. And if you do these actions really well, you're just going to know that's elevation, that elevates the eyelid, that elevates the eye, that elevates the skin above the eye. That's how you can use all of these actions to get these answers right. Another thing to look at is the leg model. So I have these, this is the back, that's the front. If you look, all of these, it's very similar to your arm, where if you take this and you just go this is going to be leg flexion or knee flexion. So if you get good at these individual actions, you'll be very good at on your final. So flexion can be in the shoulder. You can have knee and hip flexion. Please stop for a second and do all these. Abduction and adduction. One of the easy way to think about it, abduction is away, adduction is back. But if you were in the mall, you're babysitting a small child, and they were taken away from you, that child was abducted, which means they were taken away from you. So it's a good way to know abduction is away, add is towards the midline. Another thing, sit at the gym. If your HOA or wherever you're staying has a gym, go to those, go to the community gym, go to LA Fitness, go to any of those larger gyms, and they'll have those leg machines that you push in or you pull out, and they'll have written on them what is the action. And if you're reading that and you're doing the actual action, you're going to know this is the adductor, bringing it towards the midline. Adductor is going to be pushing it away. And if you're doing this, studying this, looking at it, paying attention to it, and then doing the action, you are going to remember these actions very, very, very well. I mentioned this before, elevation up, depression is down. This would just be elevation up. You can also have protraction and retraction forward, retraction back. You can have in the jaw where you protract and retract your jaw when you're chewing and grinding teeth. Supination, palm, pronation is going to be palm down, and that's supination and pronation. You do have a supinator and a pronator teres muscle, so knowing these types of names can also help you naming the muscles themselves, like the adductor magnus and the adductor longus. You're pretty sure that they're going to be adducting the leg. Circumduction is in a circle, and you can also have rotation. It can be towards the midline. If it is, it's medial. Lateral is away from the midline. And then the foot. The foot has a lot of interesting little ones. Dorsal flexion is going to be moving the foot up. Plantar flexion is moving the foot down. If you have your big toe right here and you are inversion, you're moving it up, so big toe. Eversion, big toe is now going down. And you might think that's a lot of weird things, but you might have maybe seen a medical drama or something like that where somebody takes a pen or something and they do this at the bottom of the foot and the foot goes up. The foot's supposed to go up. That's a reflex. If the foot goes down, that tells you that something is wrong between the foot and the brain. So there could be some brain damage, there could be a definite spinal cord injury. So it's a good way to use diagnostics and other things to help you pinpoint what's going on with the patient. So these muscles are very important. Now, besides this model that can be on the test, so this model can definitely be on the test, all these other ones are going to be what you're mainly going to be asked on. So if there's 50 questions on the test, expect around 25 questions on origin, insertion, innervation, or action. So you have, what does the muscle do? Where's the muscle come from, the origin? Where's the muscle going to, insertion? And then what is the nerve that innervates that muscle? But before you do any of that, you're going to sit down with these models. Sit down with the head and neck muscle, or model. And then you start going in, frontalis, orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris. And you're going to become very familiar and very comfortable with the name for the muscle. So another way to do it is to look at YouTube. Look at dissected models, look at the models being examined. I do have some myself, but sometimes other people can explain it better. By all means, use any tool you possibly can. You can get an app on your phone where you can download a little game on your phone and you're pointing to things that says, where is this muscle? Point to it, and you point to it, you point to it. And it kind of gives you scores. You can compare it with other friends, but you might not have a lot of time to do that depending on when you start these games. What I would do is all of the muscles we're going to go over are going to be superficial muscles, which means they're on top. So when I said frontalis, frontalis is right here. And if I lift my eyebrows, I can feel that muscle contracting. If I wink, that's my orbicularis oculi. You have your deltoid, biceps brachii, brachialis, triceps. All of the muscles we're talking about are going to be on the surface of your body. So when you're doing actions with your pectoralis major, you can feel that it only contracts when you bring your arm or medial rotate your arm in towards your body. So palpating on yourself, palpating is just the scientific way of saying touch. You can also go to articulated skeleton. You might need to go to a library or an SLC or an A&P lab to look at that. The articulated skeletons are the ones that have blue and red lines on them. They can kind of help you understand where origins, insertions are, and then you can put those 2 points closer together, and then you see the actions. You can also study the meaning of the word. Where did it come from? And if you do that, it's going to take time. But unless you're really good with languages, I would skip that immediately because you might not have enough time to do that. But one thing you have to do, you've all taken a midterm before, and you've now taken a midterm practical if you've never taken a practical exam before. You might have been taking that test, and when you were writing it down or typing it in the computer, you might have had a little, almost like a block, where you go to write it down or you go to type it and you're like, what is the word? Oh my gosh, I just went, my mind went blank. And the reason why your mind's going blank is because you didn't practice that. So saying it out loud, writing it out, or typing it a couple times on a computer is another thing you can do to train your mind, train your hands, and use those muscles to spell those words. Spelling still does not count, but this is a good way because muscles have really strange names. So a lot more students have this type of issue on the final than they did on the midterm. Because humerus, you might not have known how to spell it, but you might have spelled it like humorous as ha ha funny, but I would still have given you credit for it. Zygomaticus major, you might have some trouble with it. Sternocleidomastoid in the neck, and you might have difficulty with it if you don't practice how to say it and spell it. There are 600 and so muscles in the human body. There are a ton in your fingers, ton small ones in your face, many for swallowing and speech that are just a few fibers long and a few fibers thick. So you have a lot of really small ones. All we're going to be looking at is the big ones. And we're looking at the ones on the charts. So let's get started and let's go through each one, each chart, and each picture, and hopefully by the end of this you will understand exactly what you need to know to do the best you possibly can on the final for muscles. Let's get started. Head and neck. So head and neck, This is the model I like. I like this one. It's big. This one, it's okay. It's only half. So sometimes students get a little, freaked out by it. Students usually don't like this one because this one looks like it's staring at you. So if I just kind of, oh, what are you looking at over there? You don't know. So those blue eyes are a little freaky. So I usually just like to use this one, but sometimes this one's not available. So the other ones are the ones you'll see on your test. So it's really important to study all the different ones. Don't just study a picture. Don't just study everything. Touch it on yourself. So if you see that on the model, you know exactly which muscle you're pointing at. So orbicularis oculi. Orbicularis oculi is blinking. So if you're out and you do like this to somebody, you're using your orbicularis oculi. If you want to blow them a kiss, you're going to be using your orbicularis oris, which is the ring of muscle around your mouth. Frontalis is going to be in the front. Occipitalis will be in the back. Temporalis be on the side. Zygomaticus major and minor. I'm going to show you on the picture because they're right here. They're very, very, very small, and I can show you this one's zygomaticus minor major. It's not going to show up in the view, so I will wait until we get to the picture to show you which one's medial and which one's lateral. Buccinator. Buccinator for this model is right here. And the way you can kind of tell it is you can kind of see that it's got a yellow circle in there. That is actually a nerve. You don't need to know the name of it, but you can tell by, if you look in there, there is muscle fibers going around that yellow circle. That is your buccinator muscle. Sternocleidomastoid is going to be from the sternum, clavicle going to the mastoid process. That's why it's called sternocleidomastoid. And masseter is very easy. It's just the one that helps with mastication and chewing, and it's the one on your zygomatic bone to your mandible. Which brings me to origins, insertions, actions, innervations. The best way to study this is to sit with the models. If you can go to the SLC, you can go to an anatomy lab. I strongly recommend sitting with them and just pointing to them and going through it. If you're taking an in-person class, staying an extra half hour after going over these models, you'll be surprised how quickly and how easy it is for you to go over this. If you're doing this online or virtually, you can look at the pictures, but it will take you a little bit more time to kind of get the hang of it. That's why I strongly recommend a tutoring appointment or a library so you can sit in real time, face-to-face with somebody to go over this. But your goal, when you first start, just go over what's the name of this? What's this? Frontalis. What's that? Orbicularis oculi. What is this right here? Masseter. So if you go through it and you're having somebody point to them and you're getting all these names right, then what you do is, I don't have any note cards, but I do have a post-it note. I would write orbicularis oculi on the front. Frontal bone is the origin and maxilla. Insertion is the skin around the eyelids. Its action is blink, and then its innervation is facial. So when you're sitting at home or you have time, where you just have, some time to study, you take out your stack of note cards and you just go through them. You're going to notice we only have about 30 or so muscles that you need to know origins, insertions, actions, innervations for. If you make your note cards immediately on this day, start the note cards the first day you hear about them, it's going to take you longer to write the note cards than it will be for you to memorize the note cards. I know that sounds impossible, but if you've ever written out note cards, you're going to find out that it's going to take you a few hours to do that. It's going to take you a couple of minutes to flip through them and read the back of them. And the repetition with that will make it very easy for you to be on the test and say, what's the origin? Well, if you know this is the frontalis, go to the note card. You're going to say the skin above the eye. So that is how best possible way you can study for this test. Also, if I'm touching the face, all of those are facial. Side, trigeminal. Spinal accessory is going to be in the neck. And what's the only muscle we have in the neck? Sternocleidomastoid. And once you get into the hang of where are these muscles located? Do your note cards. You're going to see patterns where the inside of the arm has this nerve. The top of the arm has this nerve. The elbow region has this nerve. And the more repetition you do and the more practice you get, the easier it will be for you to see those patterns. Let's take a look at the zygomaticus major and minor. And this one's kind of tricky, only because if you think about it, this was named for a pig. So a pig has a snout, has the nose and the mouth all in the same structure where it eats. Now, the zygomaticus minor is going to be medial or towards the nose. The major is going to be further away. But if you think about this and you kind of make, a thing, you have a snout, because the zygomaticus major is going to be on the side and the snout in a pig goes back and forth, the zygomaticus major is such a huge muscle when you look at it on a pig. So minor is medial, major is going to be further away. We went over all the other structures, the muscles. The only thing we're going to look at on the head, the galea aponeurotica. That's the white thing. And if you're like, well, you didn't tell me to memorize that. I did, because that's an origin and an insertion. So knowing the galea aponeurotica is important, but I can just ask you, name that structure, and you have to put galea aponeurotica. Here are the rest of them, where you see the temporalis again, the galea aponeurotica, occipitalis, frontalis. Take your time looking at these, go through all of these, so it's easier for you to kind of understand what are all the different views, how do you find it on all the different models, and how easy is it for you to answer these questions from the pictures that I have supplied on your Canvas course. This again is the model that I really like. You can see that yellow circle with the buccinator muscle right there, and you can see that that's deep because the mandible's cut. The other side would have the masseter and the zygomaticus minor and the zygomaticus major. And then the sternocleidomastoid from the manubrium of the sternum, the clavicle, and going all the way into the mastoid process. We also have this model right here. I didn't bring it into my room because it's big and heavy. I brought the other ones, but you can still see the temporalis here. You can still see the sternocleidomastoid. So it's important. With any model you do, don't just memorize one and say, is this the one on the test? I did say this is the one I'm probably going to do it, but students that just study one model, they're the ones that are going to try to write down a question and just go blank. So use all the models. I'm not punishing you. I'm just trying to make this exam easier for you in the long run. So these, chest, abdomen, and back. Chest, abdomen, and back is kind of nice because you have the muscle man and muscle woman. So muscle woman, muscle man. So you have the external oblique. External oblique muscle is going to be the one that's just going to be on the outside. Internal oblique is going to be on the inside. Rectus abdominis is going to be running down your abs. And then with that, you'll see on another picture, you have the linea alba, and you also have the rectus sheath. We'll look at that in another picture. Transverse abdominis, I have to show you a special model for that. Diaphragm. Diaphragm is only going to be seen on this model right here with the muscle woman. So if I remove the chest cavity, I can show you that right below the lungs, you see a muscle right above the liver and the stomach. That muscle right there is your diaphragm. So if I look, that right there is your diaphragm. Lungs, liver, diaphragm separates the two things. And the important thing is the phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve, if you have a chiropractor, if you have a certain type of teacher for the lecture, they might make you memorize a spinal root. C345 keeps you alive for the phrenic nerve, because if you damage the phrenic nerve, you can't breathe on your own, so you'll be on a respirator for the rest of your life. So that nerve is extremely, extremely, extremely important. Pectoralis major is on top. So it's on top, right there where you'd think. And then pectoralis minor would be just underneath it, and you can see it on the side. I probably would not have this because you can see pectoralis major on top, minor is just going to be underneath it. It's very, very, very small, and I haven't asked it in probably over a decade. So you could cross that out and be pretty certain that that's not going to be on the final. Serratus anterior is going to be right here on the side. Then the trapezius is going to be right here on your neck and back. The only one that's not on here is your latissimus dorsi, but I'll show you that on the next pictures. So with this one, you have all the same things you needed to know on the head and neck. You had the origins, insertions, actions, innervations, but I skipped a couple of them because this is the only model that you can see some of those things. So you do have your rectus abdominis. Going down the middle is your linea alba. So if you see linea alba running down the middle, you also have the linea alba running down the middle here. You have that white that covers the rectus abdominis, and that's going to be called the rectus sheath, so the rectus sheath is right there. You also have an external and an internal oblique. How do you tell them apart? Do you see anything different on these two sides? And if you said, this side I see the serratus anterior, this side I see more an internal view because I see the ribs. And if you look closely, the muscle fibers for this model, the muscle fibers of the internal oblique run towards the iliac crest. If you go to this side over here, the external oblique runs up towards the serratus anterior. So if you look, external oblique is going to be on this side, internal oblique is going to be on the side where you can see the ribs. And the final one, transverse abdominis, if you look here, this is going to go like a belt around your waist, and the muscle fibers run horizontal around your waist. That's your transverse abdominis. And you can even see on this model, transverse abdominis is running like this. Internal oblique right here is running down towards the iliac crest. External oblique is running up towards the serratus anterior. You do have some other really important muscles like the rotator cuff. We're going to look at that with the arm. You also have the erector spinae that helps you sit up straight. Those are going to be right there. But for the most part, on your back, on your lab test, you're only going to have trapezius and latissimus dorsi, because all the ones up here are obviously going to be rotator cuff. We'll cover that in the arm. Gluteus maximus and medius, we're going to cover that when we do the leg. And here you can see the muscle woman. The chest is removed, so you can see the diaphragm right there, just below the lungs but above the liver. And what nerve innervates the diaphragm? The phrenic nerve. There's the muscle man where you see the trapezius and latissimus dorsi. And again, post-it notes, note cards, origin, insertion, action, innervation. I mentioned the rotator cuff muscles. So the rotator cuff muscles are very important. And the rotator cuff muscles, you just need to know where they are. So supraspinatus, above the spine. Infraspinatus, below the spine. Teres minor, right there. All of those right there are going to be infraspinatus, teres minor. That's actually teres major. Teres major does not go to the head of the humerus, so it's not a rotator cuff muscle. But supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and subscapularis, they all do go to the head of the humerus, so they're all considered rotator cuff. For this, I would strongly recommend going over the videos, because these are very, very, very small, especially when you have them around the wrist and the hand. One quick thing I'm going to tell you, like if you look, deltoid, brachialis, brachioradialis, triceps, and biceps, deltoid, brachialis is in the middle, biceps on top, triceps is on the bottom, and if you put your arm forward, that bump right there, that is your brachioradialis muscle. And if you look at all the other ones, and if you looked at this and you're like, oh my God, there's so many to memorize, you're going to find there's going to be 3 flexors and 3 extenders. And if you look, the 3 flexors and 3 extenders, what's a flexor? A flexor is going to be on the front. So flexors are on the front, extensors are on the back. Which one is your radius? Which one's your ulna? Radius, you can rate things, thumbs up, thumbs down. So extensor carpi radialis, flexor carpi radialis. So go over those videos for those so you can do origins, insertions, actions, and innervations. And again, the more repetition you do have a lot of canvas activity and a lot of canvas labeling to do to kind of help you out with all of these labeling and figuring out where are these structures. And you can see deltoid, triceps on the back. Biceps is going to be between, the brachialis is going to be between the biceps and the triceps. And you can take a look at these at your leisure to kind of show you. One quick thing, the supinator. Supinator is very, very, very deep. Can't see it on this model. I can remove everything, but it's right up against your humerus and your radius, and you can't see that muscle on this model. You can see it on another one, but because I don't know which modality you're taking this test, supinator will not be on your final. But all the other ones you see could be. And then here's this one that's labeled. And then here's this one that you can go through and you can look and see, can you label them? For the leg, just as scary. But the leg, I don't think is as bad. Most of you have heard of these muscles. So biceps femoris, semimembranosus, semitendinosus. Biceps femoris is right there. Semitendinosus. If you look right here, you can see how it looks like there's two muscles kind of on top of each other. Tendinosus is on top, membranosus is underneath it. And then if you look here, rectus femoris, this is medial, this is lateral, so this is your vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and if you remove the rectus femoris, you'll see behind it is going to be the vastus intermedialis. So those are four muscles right there. And if you're like, four, they have something in the leg called a quadriceps. 1, 2, 3, 4, quadriceps. These three on the back are called your hamstrings because this is the way they used to hang the pig or the pork and then bleed it and butcher it. So they hung those up by the hamstrings. And you think I'm making that up, but I'm not. So you have gluteus maximus and medius is going to be up. You have your tensor fascia lata, and what does it tense? It tenses your iliotibial band, and then you have your tibialis anterior, gastrocnemius going into your calcaneal tendon. So I went pretty quick. I left off sartorius, gracilis, adductor longus. For the most part, going over the videos, making your note cards for origins, insertions, actions, innervations. That's the best way to go over this model and all of the other models that we have for the muscles. So please take your time, go through each individual muscle, and here you can see your your biceps femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus. You can see your tensor fascia lata, which kind of sounds like a Starbucks drink, tensing your iliotibial band, your gastrocnemius going into the calcaneal tendon because it's going into your calcaneus, if you can remember back and make that connection with the bones of the foot. And then there's the muscle man. And then this is me saying goodbye. Good luck. This will take a lot of time. This will take probably as much studying as you did for the bones. But remember, if you do study well and put the time in, you will do very well on the final exam. And some students find the final exam easier than the midterm exam because you've worked with muscles, you've had PE classes, you maybe were part of an athletic team, so all of these terms shouldn't be as foreign to you. So good luck, and just take your time, do one at a time, and master it before you move on.